good evening to you. I'm Lisa Broom with the CBC Evening News. In our top story tonight, an anti-violence campaign has been rolled out for Barbadian schools, and Acting Prime Minister Santia Bradshaw and education officials are hoping it will not only tackle the problem but end it. The program was launched at the Princess Margaret School, whose students were the first on board the initiative. We hear more in this report from Kishmar Singist.
I pledge to be a peaceful person.
I pledge to be a peaceful person.
I pledge not to fight with others.
I pledge not to fight with others.
Or encourage others to fight.
Or encourage others to fight.
With that pledge, Princess Margaret students have committed to upholding peace and staying true to the theme, Peace Begins With Me. The anti-violence campaign targets students, teachers and the community in general, with the understanding that everyone has a role to play in addressing school violence. Acting Prime Minister Santia Bradshaw sees the initiative as timely, given what has played out recently.
We have seen an increasing number of videos circulating on social media by some of our young people, and indeed some of the students even of this school, regarding a level of violence taking place one-on-one against our students and certainly against our teachers. It is of concern certainly to me, it is of concern to UNICEF, it is of concern to the ministry, and it certainly was of concern to a young lady by the name of Ira Newton.
Aria was recognized for refusing to retaliate to the taunts of a bully. Ms. Bradshaw, in commending Aria, says she has proven that young people can walk away from violent activity. The Acting Prime Minister also announced that as part of the campaign going forward, a pledge day will be observed.
Today, all students in Barbados will make the Peace Pledge, and as a sign of their commitment in creating peaceful environments, whether off or on the school compound. They will be given a peace wristband to wear with pride as a public display that they will strive to be peacemakers.
Several Barbadian entertainers are on board supporting the program. The UNICEF Office for the Eastern Caribbean is also a partner.
I remember this year, we saw in the media the shocking stories of stabbing in schools. We learned of fights and bullying among students. We heard reports of altercations among students and teachers. School violence represents a violation of the right of each child to go to school in a safe and protected environment.
Public service announcements by students will form part of the anti-violence campaign. Kishmar Singist, CBC News.
Thanks, Kishmar. Well, mindful of the increased cost to vacationers because of new taxes, government is on a mission to give tourists more value for their money. Now, one part of that drive was launched today. It's an expanded and upgraded information booth at the Grantley Adams International Airport. Kent Jerson has more.
The new information booth at the Grantley Adams International Airport is a reflection of government's recognition that if you're asking visitors to pay more, they will expect more. The highly visible facility is located just before visitors exit the arrivals hall. Tourism Minister Kerry Simmons says the idea is to enhance the tourism product by starting with the initial contact.
Essentially what it is aimed at doing is being able to offer a first impression that is almost a wow impression for the visitor, where if you have need for language assistance, you will have persons who can speak a plurality of languages. If you have difficulties because you're infirm or disabled, then you're given access to wheelchair and other type of assistance. If you just want to find out things about Destination Barbados, then you can be given ideas about dining, where different properties and attractions are located, so on and so forth.
CEO of the Barbados Tourism Product Authority, Dr. Kerry Hall, reinforces the importance of the information booth.
We're going to be concentrating heavily on this component because you don't have a second chance to make a first impression. And I know for a fact that there's some visitors who come and may not have the best experience, welcoming experience, and they take it with them throughout their entire holiday. And our job is to make sure it is such a wow that it just heightens their anticipation for what it's yet to come with this phenomenal, unique, world-class brand that we call Barbados.
Minister Simmons also revealed that government is exploring other ways of improving the tourism product. Among them, making the airport and the country in general more accessible for the disabled traveler.
Because there are a lot of persons with disabilities who are traveling. Barbados is losing out on that type of business because Barbados is not sufficiently disability friendly, and our accommodation sector in particular now has to be moved ever so gradually towards dealing with that. And that is a conversation that we're going to start to have, especially with respect to new properties. New properties coming into the pool must in the future be able to designate a percentage of their rooms to persons with disabilities.
The tourism minister is also encouraging all Barbadians to play their part to make the critical tourism industry the best it can be. Kent Gerson, CBC News.
Thanks, Kent. And while it's too early to determine the full impact of government's increased taxation on the key tourism sector, there's some positive news amidst the concerns about higher costs for vacationers. This from Minister of Tourism and International Transport, Kerry Simmons. Now, while acknowledging some industry players are worried about the possible fallout, he says there are indications demand for Destination Barbados remains strong.
It is really too early to tell because the situation is really very fluid. You may have one hotel saying that they have experienced a couple of cancellations. Then you may have a few hotels saying that we've experienced increases of booking. I'll give you a very real thing that was drawn to my attention only last week. Out of Panama, they are now telling us that we need to have a bigger plane because all the planes that are booked starting from 17th of this month are full. And that's happy news.
He also says there are plans in train which could help to counter any negative impact from the increased taxation. Among them is an initiative by Virgin Airlines.
There's some sides of this, obviously, that we're going to have to promote. There's the opening of the world's first departure beach by Virgin Airlines, and that will be later this year in an official way. And we expect that because it will happen in winter, it will help us to offset some of the challenges that may happen from the British end in winter.
In other news now, the creative imagination and raw talent of young Barbadians will be instrumental in carrying Barbados forward. And government has pledged its support to initiatives which will allow the youth to maximize their potential. This commitment from Youth and Community Empowerment Minister Adrian Ford. He was speaking during the opening address at the National Council for Science and Technology's Youth Internet Governance Forum at the Barbados Community College. Mr. Ford encouraged the youth to embrace the opportunities presented to them.
We have to believe that we can dream that special dream in Barbados, and this government will partner with you. We will walk hand in glove to ensure that you have every opportunity using all the technological devices to be the best that you can be. And that is a commitment across the board by our administration.
Well, there's more news coming up after this break, so stay tuned. The Ministry of Environment and National Beautification is optimistic that through its National Cleanup and Beautification Program, Barbados will undergo a physical and aesthetic transformation. The program got underway over the weekend at the Wim Gully in St. Peter. Minister Trevor Prescott says the program will also feature an education component as Barbadians have to help keep the island clean.
Because we're talking about a cultural transformation as well, sensitization and an outreach program. So we're going to stretch. Is an inward reach and it's an outward stretch. The inward reach is that level of collective consciousness. The collective consciousness will cause people to produce, and we will be able to reach this really kind of psychological as well transformation which is required in our culture. So Barbados will see this as a national duty, not only to the nation itself but to the individual, in trying to create a healthy environment.
Efforts have already started to make conditions better for people who operate from the Bridgetown Fisheries Complex. This is according to Minister of Maritime Affairs and the Blue Economy, Kirk Humphrey, who's undertaken several tours of the facility over the past few weeks. According to him, the government has an obligation to ensure conditions at the fish markets are comparable to those provided for other workers across the island.
I am sure MP Thorne has persons in the community who do contract work, and that we will have a conversation very soon about the contractors here who could help us improve the conditions here, because people should be allowed to work in decent, not only decent looking conditions, but decent conditions, because Barbadians deserve to be working in good conditions. And we also have, and I'm sure that's part of the work with the crane, to improve the areas where the boats have to come to port, the harbor areas and all those areas. Chief, we have to make sure that the conditions are conducive to fishing.
Mr. Humphrey says based on his conversations with fishermen, there are a number of areas that have to be prioritized, whether through legislation or otherwise.
We have to improve, I believe, the machinery, the equipment, the technology on a lot of our boats. And we as the government, we have to make the resources available so that people can improve the technology on their boats. We also have now to study what is happening in the ocean, and why is it that we are no longer seeing the same amount of fish or the same size fish. But it is also incumbent, I think, upon us to find a way to stop overfishing in the areas where we have overfished. Because now there are some people who are catching fish that are so small and so young that they're really depriving future generations of having the benefits of those fish.
I tell you the best. He is the best by far.
Minister Humphrey was speaking during celebrations for Fishermen's Day at the Barinda Cox Fishing Complex in Oistins over the weekend. He and Stella Lady St. John presented several prizes to fisherfolk in appreciation for their hard work over the last year. Well, still to come on the evening news, a look at some of the stories making headlines across the region. Trinidad and Tobago is already planning for CariFesta 14. Representatives of the Planning Committee have provided the 26th Regional Cultural Committee meeting with an update. Program Manager for Culture and Community Development at the CARICOM Secretariat, Dr. Hilary Brown, says the regional grouping is pleased with the level of preparations so far.
They are already out of the blocks with their planning. They have at least identified a sort of the core of their host country management committee. They have a marketing person on board, so they have already gone out with logo and jingle competition and designing a logo. And so they came to RCC, to the Regional Cultural Committee meeting, and presented their hosting proposal and gave us a feel of the venues and their hotel capacity. And they also let us know that sort of the hub for CariFesta will be in the Queen's Park Savannah, which I think will be a good location.
Well, Barbados was the last host of the regional cultural event, and a review was also conducted.
So that we can ensure that the lessons learned carry forward to Trinidad for CariFesta 14 in 2019. And the regional development strategy, we advanced that by looking at the action and implementation plan for the strategy. But I think most importantly, and I think what was perhaps most fulfilling for the delegates, was that we had a really good discussion on financing culture.
CARICOM leaders meeting in Jamaica this week will have a packed agenda ahead of them for the 39th regular meeting of the Conference of Heads of Government. Prime Minister Mia Amour-Motley will lead the delegation from Barbados. During the conference, Jamaica's leader, Andrew Holness, will assume the chairmanship of the regional grouping. Minister of Foreign Affairs, Kamina Johnson-Smith, says there are a number of key items to be discussed.
We're going to have the first meeting of COFAP, the Council of Finance Ministers. that will meet for the first time in almost 5 years. That will take place on the morning of the 4th. And the Prime Minister will also be chairing a meeting of the External Affairs and Trade Committee of the Quasi-Cabinet of CARICOM. So there will be very important matters discussed there, and heads will receive an update on matters related to Brexit, the ACP post-Cotonou arrangements, as well as matters related to WTO and the world trade environment.
In the Bahamas, an American woman was killed and several other people injured after their tour boat exploded over the weekend. We have this report from Eyewitness News Bahamas.
The tragedy reportedly unfolded shortly after 10 yesterday morning when the Charter 4 Seas adventure boat was traveling through the Keys with 10 tourists and 2 Bahamian crew members on board. Its engine, as we said, exploded. Now visitors on a nearby vessel at the time were filmed crying and screaming as they attempted to move their boat further away. Swift action had to be taken by island officials to assist with transporting the injured to the local clinic. Now, according to health officials here in the capital, 6 persons were transported by air ambulance and taken to the Princess Margaret Hospital for further treatment. 4 of the injured were also transported by U.S. Coast Guard to Bayfront Health Services in Florida for medical treatment. Eyewitness News spoke with Health Minister Dr. Dwayne Sands late this afternoon. He provided this update.
The only update is that all the persons hospitalized at Princess Margaret Hospital are stable.
Well, here's a tip now from Cooperators General Insurance.
This tip of the day is brought to you by Cooperators General Insurance Company Limited. Insurance the way you want it to be.
Membership of the Asthma Association of Barbados is open to anyone. Members are entitled to purchase either a spacing device or a peak flow meter at a nominal cost. This tip is brought to you in association with the Asthma Association of Barbados.